Hello everybody and welcome to Decoding the WSL, the podcast dedicated to the stats and facts in the WSL. Another weekend has been and gone in the league, and that means even more to talk about. There were last minute winners, an own goal, and the table is splitting in two. I'm going to be giving you all the numbers and all the stats you need to look back at this weekend's games. I'm your host, Sam Biccarino. Yes, here we are, listener. Thank you for giving up some time in your busy calendar to join me for this Game Week 4 review. It is currently Monday the 14th of October as I record, although I presume it may be at least Tuesday, if not after, by the time you're listening to this. Before we dive into the analysis, game by game, let's just have a quick review about what happened this weekend. Given the discourse recently about him and his job, it is not a game that Yoni Sideval would have 1-2 lost, but 1-2 it was as Chelsea took all 3 points at the Emirates. Spurs' visit to LSV on Sunday was when Elizabeth Turland decided she'd open her Manchester United account as she scored 2, both assisted by Celine Bizet, who left Spurs in the summer. Captain Fantastic Maya Letitia getting the other in the 3-0 win from the spot. The Seagulls beat the Eagles 1-0 to keep their place in the top 4. Then we moved to the 2 matches between the bottom 4. In the Midlands derby, Leicester held off Villa to keep the score at 0-0. While West Ham made the trip to Everton, the Hammers took the lead, but Melissa Lawley-Cross deflected over the helpless Shemek to mean that finished 1-1, and those two sides still remain at bottom of the table. In a match City were expecting to win, it was a bit of funny business in the first half with Liverpool taking the lead, but it was definitely bunny business in the second as Bunny Shaw's 2 goals gave City the 2-1 win. And we're going to start today's episode by going back to the Emirates. Saturday afternoon at 1:45 live on BBC One, it was 2 of last year's top 3, Arsenal and Chelsea, facing off against each other. Chelsea started well with a Mara Ramirez goal. It's not often you see a standing overhead kick, but that's what she did. Daphne van Domselaar was rooted, although I think the ball was in the air for so long, she definitely could have moved and could have probably got it. Then just after the 15-minute mark, there was a run from Lauren James, who crossed in for an unmarked header from Sondi Baltimore. Tim Stillman on X pointed out how unorganised are at defending crosses. It's definitely worth checking out his post if you haven't already seen it. Beth Mead did run all the way back with Sondi Baltimore, but didn't actually look at her at all. So when Baltimore kept going into the box, she was left unmarked. Caitlin Ford got a goal from a tight angle after mugging off Lucy Bronze with some tight skill and good footwork. Baltimore was booked late on after Cuthbert shoved Lotte Woodman-Moy, which was a bit strange, almost a bit of mistaken identity there. But later on in injury time, Erin Cuthbert then got a yellow card herself, meaning if she'd have got a yellow card for the shove in the first place, that would have been a red card. I do, however, agree with a very good point that Farrah Williams made on the Women's Football Show, which was that the second one was a bit of a soft yellow card and probably shouldn't have been. Probably a foul, but not necessarily a yellow card. So Cuthbert coming away from the game with 1 yellow is probably fair. Stina Blackstenius also rattled the bar very late on, and there was a very well-hit strike from Alessia Russo, saved by Hannah Hampton in the dying minutes. But it did finish Arsenal 1, Chelsea 2. That means Chelsea have kept up their 100% point record, although have lost their 100% clean sheet record for the season after conceding that goal to Caitlin Ford. It's Arsenal's first loss at home in over a year in the league, which is very impressive from them that they've kept it going this long for any team, that is, not necessarily for Arsenal. But yeah, Liverpool at the start of last season on the 1st of October, you may remember that 1-0 win, I think it was the last time they lost at home. So that record is now out of the water, and we'll have to see if it's going to be another year before they lose again. There's quite a few stats I wanted to go into on this game. So go through some of the sort of standard ones. Arsenal had slightly more possession, 56-44. They had more shots, 20-11. Alessia Russo getting the most with 4. Arsenal only got 4 of their 20 on target though, and Chelsea got 6 of their 11. So that goes some way to starting to describe what I'm going to tell you now, which is basically that Arsenal did really well in this game and put some good numbers, but just didn't have the finishing touch, whereas Chelsea were the opposite. They didn't put amazing numbers in, but definitely had that finishing touch and had that relentlessness. Arsenal completed more passes than Chelsea, 59 more, or 21% more, 347 versus the 286 of Chelsea. Leah Williamson completed the most passes in the game, as you'd probably expect. You know, any game where Leah Williamson plays, she probably will complete the most passes. She had 65. Katie McCabe created the most chances. She created 5, whereas no one else created more than 2. She also completed the most crosses with 5. There were 4 other players who had 1 each, which means that Katie McCabe completed 5 of the 9 crosses that were completed in the match, or, well, 56%, just over half. Mara Ramirez, this is a stat that if you've watched the highlights, you won't be surprised to see. Mara Ramirez completed the most dribbles in the match, with 5 out of the 6 she attempted. Emily Fox, with 3, was the only other player on more than 2. So Mara Ramirez definitely had a bit of a game plan to basically try and dribble her way through the team, and did it very effectively if you've seen any of the footage from the game. There were 3 players that had 5 or more touches in the box, and they were all Arsenal players. There was Alessia Russo with 12, Caitlin Ford with 10, and Caldente with 8. Again, showing that Chelsea didn't have loads of chances, didn't have loads of opportunities, but when they got them, they were definitely clinical. The 3 top players for defensive actions in the match were all Chelsea players. There were 18 from Khadija Buchanan, 16 from Millie Bright, and 11 from Lucy Bronze. So, once again, Arsenal making more of a threat towards the goal, even if it wasn't from their shots on target necessarily, but making Chelsea putting some defensive actions. Marina Caldente, however, actually won the most tackles in the game with 4 out of the 5 that she attempted, and that now means that she has won the most tackles in the league this year, joint with CJ Bott on 16. I think a player like Caldente has been brought in to Arsenal for many reasons, but one of them was not necessarily to win loads of tackles, but there she is. She's doing her bit for the team and working back. Looking at how the 2 teams have performed over the season, Arsenal now have the 3rd highest XG in the league with 7, the 2nd lowest XG against with 3.1, and therefore the 2nd best expected goals difference. So, the difference between the 2, about 4. However, they are not 2nd or 3rd in the league. In fact, they are down in 6th. Chelsea are now the top scorers in the league with 10, which is from just 5 XG, so double their XG. That is not a rate you will expect they will continue as the season goes on, but does show that they are being very clinical early on. Arsenal, however, at the other end of the spectrum, are the worst for this. They have scored 3 goals fewer than their XG would suggest, so they've got 7 XG in total and have only scored 4 goals. The only team that I would say is worse than this is Everton. They haven't created as much XG, but with minus 2.7, sort of as a percentage of the number of goals they've scored, it is worse, which, if you know how many goals Everton has scored, you might work that out later on. Before I get on to any more, I just wanted to go through a question that I had from Isha on Instagram, which is, which teams would be doing a lot better if they had a more clinical striker? Well, their goals versus the XG, or the XG over performance, as you might hear me call it, is the stat that is perfect for answering this question, because it literally looks at how good are the chances that they're getting and how many goals are they actually scoring, which is a direct way of saying how clinical are their strikers. And Arsenal, as well as Everton, are the least clinical in the league. It's quite similar to last season, especially for Arsenal. They were, I can't remember if they were the worst or the second worst in the league last season, and their sort of lack of goal scoring prowess, the lack of converting chances, was something that really let them down. I think they would have been in the conversation much more to win the title. Obviously, they were 5 points off in the end, but they would have been right up there if they had someone in the side that was a bit more clinical in front of goal. Some other stats from the 2 teams this season. So Arsenal now have the most key passes in the league with 51. Stina Blackstenius has accumulated the most XG per 90 minutes with 0.88, and yet she is still yet to score. To be fair to her, she's not played that much. I think she's played about 150 minutes in the league so far, because she's basically just coming on as a sub. Mara Ramirez has the most goal involvements per 90 now. She's now, obviously, after a goal today, she's now at 1.64 goal involvements per 90 minutes that she plays, which is really high, especially considering that she's not just playing in the WSL, she's putting in some good minutes in the Champions League as well. The last stat I want to highlight before I move on is that Daphne van Domselaar has the best performance against her post-shot XG. So if you're new here, I'll explain what post-shot XG is. It's basically an XG stat that is adjusted to only account for shots on target. It's not necessarily that useful for looking at strikers, but really useful for looking at goalkeepers and how well they deal with shots that they actually get at their goal. Daphne van Domselaar is currently at plus 1.9, which means she should have conceded 1.9 goals more than she actually has, given the quality of the shots on target that she's faced. So that puts her number 1 in the league, ahead of the likes of Fallon Tullis-Joyce and Lisa Kopp, who aren't far behind her, but still goes to show that although Arsenal aren't doing that well, actually the goalkeeping situation is still not going too badly. Overall, I think this has definitely piled more pressure on Jonas Eidevall. I think he'll get a bit of leeway, given that it is against Chelsea. You know, I'd be surprised to see him sacked after this game, for example. It might be another story if he goes another match losing. But it was a better performance than Everton. You can see that from the XG that Arsenal created. They actually created 2.6 XG compared to just 1.1 that Chelsea created. So Arsenal created 1.5 XG more than the team that beat them, because they created over double. But yeah, like I say, they underperformed their XG by 1.6, whereas Chelsea overperformed theirs by 0.9. In fact, Arsenal actually created the most XG in the whole WSL this weekend. So creating the chances and creating the opportunities isn't the problem. The problem is something around the finishing. I don't know what that is. I'm not a coach necessarily. I'm not the person to go in and fix that, but I can highlight that issue and see that's where they're going wrong. They've obviously got some really high quality players at the club. They've brought in recent times Alessia Russo. They've brought in Mariona Caldente now. They've got Stina Blackstenius. They've got players like Frida Marnham, Caitlin Ford, Beth Mead. You know, they shouldn't have a problem with their finishing with the players they've got. So it'll be interesting to see what they do to overcome that. Now on to Sunday's games, and we're going to start with the first game of the day. It was live on Sky Sports at 12:30. It was Man United hosting Spurs. 5 players in this match playing against their former side. 3 that are currently at Manchester United and 2 at Spurs. Martha Thomas, one of those, almost opened the scoring early on if it wasn't for a great save from PTJ. Elizabeth Turland got her first United goal. There was really good strength against Molly Bartrip to score a volley crossed in by former Spurs player Celine Bazette. Celine Bazette then put another cross in later on in the game where Elizabeth Turland beat Ashley Neville in the air to head the ball in for her second. It was almost a hat-trick, but it was a bit of a poor finish by Turland's standards when Spencer touched the shot onto the post. That chance was actually a 0.7 post-shot XG chance, so if a player gets that shot on target, you would expect them to score 70% of the time. In this case, it wasn't. You'd expect from a player that's as high quality as Elizabeth Turland and is so good at overachieving her XG, that'd be bread and butter for her, but apparently not. And Spencer did well, to be fair. Then late on, United got a penalty. Ash Neville with, I think, one of the harshest penalties you'll see get given this season. The ball was deemed to have struck her arm, which I think it just about did, but she was trying to get it out of the way. I think it was in a relatively natural position given how she was running, but it was given anyway. It was very well dispatched by the captain, Maya Le Tissier. Ella Toon took the ball initially, making everyone think that she was going to be taking it. I guess they were expecting some dark arts from Spurs trying to put her off, while Maya Le Tissier stayed out the back and composed herself and slotted away nicely. She actually scored the last goal at home to Spurs last season too, in the 2-2. That was a 90th minute equaliser on that day, although yesterday it was obviously a bit more of a comfortable 3-0 win. That was the 14th competitive meeting between the two sides. Tottenham Hotspur's still yet to win. That's definitely something that I think Spurs will be wanting to overturn, well, if they get them in the Cup this season, but definitely at home when Manchester United come to visit later on in the season. Man United are now the only team yet to concede in the league. It's something that you probably expect maybe one team to be doing 3 games in, maybe not a team that's played Spurs. Spurs have been very good this season and obviously towards the end of last season as well. But Manchester United are keeping up, and we'll see how long they can keep that up for, because Fallon Tullis-Joyce has come in after Manchester United seemingly had a failed attempt to get a replacement keeper for Mary Earps and have sort of had to use Fallon Tullis-Joyce against the coach's will, but she's certainly showing that she is more than up to the standard. And it's not like Man United haven't faced any shots. You know, they've done well defensively, but she has faced a few shots. She has faced a bit of XG, but she's done very well. From this game, I'll go through some of the stats as I normally do. Spurs actually had more possession in this game with 45% possession to Spurs' 55. Spurs also had 100 more touches than Man United, 593 to Spurs' 693. By the way, that's almost 1,300 touches in a game, which is loads. You don't normally see that many touches, so I think that shows how much the ball was getting pinged around. You know, players aren't staying on the ball for long, and also there may be a bit of frequent turnovers in that, contributing to that high number. Spurs also had more shots with 18 to Manchester United's 12, although Man United had slightly more on target, 8 compared to Spurs' 7. Spurs did complete more passes than Manchester United by about 75, and they completed over double the number of key passes, 15 to United's 7. Spurs also won more aerial duels in the game, 21 out of the 36 that were contested. So if you just looked at those numbers, you would be assuming that Spurs would be the team that were winning. You know, maybe not 3-0, but comfortably a goal or two, that they were that slight bit better than Man United. But no, it was a Manchester United 3-0 win. There was one stat that sort of goes the other way on that, and I think shows the quality of those shots, which is that Man United had 1.8 XG, so you'd probably expect them to score about 2 goals from that, whereas Spurs only had 1.1 XG. So despite the fact that Spurs had 50% more shots, they only created about 2/3 of the XG. And you would expect from those sort of XG numbers, Man United to win by probably 1 goal, probably 2-1. Alas, it wasn't to be. Spurs had a few shining stats now this season. They have the best net fouls in the league, which is a stat that's basically the number of fouls you draw minus the number of fouls you commit. So they have drawn 14 fouls more than they have committed. But I think you're sort of grasping at straws when you're boasting about that, aren't you? However, something that is good for them is that they have the best aerial duel win rate in the league, 58%. That is something that they can not necessarily, you know, if you get more aerial duels, you will win the game, but they can use that to their advantage, knowing that they are strong in the air. For Manchester United, Salim Bazet got 2 assists today, obviously, which now puts her joint most in the league alongside 3 others. Although, having played less minutes than the others, she now has the most assists per 90 in the league this year, with 1.31. So her creativity is doing very well, although that is obviously both coming against Spurs, both coming against a former side, and in a position she was kind of, I guess, not used to. She was very much played as an attacking right back today, or yesterday I should say, rather than her usual winger position, but it obviously worked well, the system worked well for her, and 2 crosses volleyed in and then headed in by Elizabeth Turland are going to be nothing for her to be worried about. I had a question in from Paul Newman on X, which is, do you think Manchester United are title contenders? For me, I don't think they've got enough to see it through. I think they're doing very well. I wouldn't expect them to, be going down to the bottom half or anything. If they were still within sort of a couple of points of first place by, halfway through at Christmas time, then maybe we can start to rethink that conversation. But I think for me, it's still between City and Chelsea for the title. I did say at the start of the season, I think Arsenal will be in that race as well, but after their start to the season, and they just look a bit lacking energy, a bit lethargic at the club, I don't think they're going to be in the title race, but I still think they'll be up there, so expect a bit of a battle between Arsenal and Manchester United for that 3rd place spot. All in all, I think Spurs today were basically beaten by some clinical finishing and then a penalty, which, as I mentioned earlier, I think was a bit harsh to be awarded. Spurs did create a lot, as I mentioned, but they couldn't make it count against who I think is probably one of the best goalkeepers in the league, certainly has been this season. Bit of a shout out to Lisa Kopp, who's only conceded 2 goals, which was Liverpool and Arsenal, from 3.8 post-shot XG, doing very well for her numbers. But Fallon Tullis-Joyce keeping 3 clean sheets on the bounce after facing a decent amount of XG herself. I think she's got to be up there for probably the goalkeeper of the season so far. Now, very much the meat and potatoes of the WSL is the 2 o'clock Sunday fixtures, and we're going to start off with Palace against Brighton. This one was live on YouTube. The teams only separated by a Villamala goal, which was after Shea Yanez came to collect a cross, she dropped it, and Villamala was first to react and put the ball in the back of the net. I know Palace did complain about this because they were saying that Nikita Paris went into Shea Yanez, but I think it was actually just Yanez landed on Paris, and to be honest, you would expect her to still be able to keep the ball in her hand. It's not like Paris, tried to punch it out of her hands or something. So I think this has to go down as, unfortunately, a goalkeeping error, but Brighton will be more than happy with it. Brighton are now 8 matches unbeaten against Crystal Palace. That is a record going back to 2007, the last time Palace beat Brighton. Palace have now still either conceded or scored in each game, but not both and not neither. They haven't had a 0-0 and they haven't had a game where both teams have scored. Be interesting to see how long that keeps up, because I don't think that's something that teams tend to keep up very long. Not that it's necessarily something you try and keep up. Some stats from this game are ones that generally go in Brighton's favour, and there's not that much to tell, to be honest. It was 40-60 in possession in Brighton's favour. Brighton completed 433 passes to Palace's 264. Vicky Losada getting the most with 59, which I wanted to point out because you don't often see a midfielder completing the most passes in a game. It's normally a centre-back, but you can see the way Brighton tend to play. They do a lot of dribbling for a start, but they tend to split it out between their centre-backs about the distribution, which then means that they don't get, there's not one or two defenders that do the most necessarily. It tends to be quite split out, and then the midfielders can pipe up, and that's why you get someone completing less than 60 passes but still being the most in the match. Palace did actually get more shots in the match than Brighton, which is something you wouldn't necessarily expect. 13 to Brighton's 11, but Brighton's shots were definitely the more high quality ones because they accumulated slightly more XG, 1.3 to Palace's 1. The winning goal was Brighton's first away goal of the season. They've now scored 8 at home, which makes them the top scorers at home in the league, but 9 overall makes them the second top goal scorers in the league overall, behind Chelsea on 10. Brighton have the most successful take-ons in the league with 47 and the best take-on success rate with 55%. That means there's a bit of quantity and quality. The quantity means that Super Dario's probably asking it of the players to go and take players on, but also the quality, because it's the right players taking on the right players at the right times in the match and doing it well. Brighton are the only team that have made all their subs still. They are still keeping up that record. No other team has made all of theirs. To be honest, with the sheer number of ACL injuries that happen in women's football, I'm surprised it's not something that all managers are doing and giving their players as much rest as possible and, having as few players complete full 90 minutes as possible. But yeah, Brighton seems to be the only team actually doing this at the moment. Despite not scoring for the last 3 games, Kiko Saika is still the league's top goal scorer, and she still has the most goals per 90 as well with 1.24, and she still has the most overachievement versus her XG plus 1.8, getting 3 goals from just 1.2 XG. Karabali has the most touches of any player in the WSL outside of Man City. Man City obviously dominate possession quite a lot in their matches, but for Karabali to be the next player in the league with the most touches, I think shows that Brighton are really becoming one of those sides that's buying into a philosophy from Dario Vidicic, and it's going well. For Palace, there are some stats where they stand out, but to be honest, they're probably unsurprisingly quite negative ones, so I'm going to just breeze over them until they get some more positive ones coming through. I had a couple of questions from social media in regards to these teams. I'm going to start with one from @BeastlightHaven on X, who asks, which team is better, Brighton or Man United? And it's a good question because at the moment, Brighton are on a real resurgence. They're a significantly better team than they were last season. Not that they were awful last season. They weren't close to getting relegated, but they're now quite far above 5th place, and they're sort of very much in that pack of the top 4 for now anyway. For me, Manchester United is still the better team, but yeah, I'm very impressed with Brighton. I didn't expect too much from them, especially with the new manager coming in, but as I mentioned, Dario Vidicic is working wonders, and I think they'll be in around a top half finish. They'll probably have Liverpool and Spurs battling against them come the end of the season, but I think Man United are the better team, but Brighton are definitely much better than I expected them to be, this time last month. The other question I had in was from Isha, another one from Isha, because she gave 2 very good questions, so I thought I'd answer them both. This one was on Instagram. She asked, can Palace stay up? And if so, who's most likely to go down based on game week 4? It's a good question because obviously the bottom 4 all played each other this weekend, and I'll come to those matches in a moment. I think Palace can stay up, but I wouldn't necessarily bank on it. I think Villa will hit some form. I think they're underperforming at the moment, and they will revert back to their mean. They'll move up the table, but the rest of the bottom 5, so Palace, Leicester, Everton and West Ham, I think will all end up in a bit of a relegation battle. If I had to choose now, I'd probably, if you put a gun to my head, I'd probably pick Everton, because I think they're probably the most likely, but it's sort of 26% likely compared to 25, 25 and 24, you know. I wouldn't bank on any of them necessarily at this stage, and it'll be definitely one to keep an eye on as the season progresses. Overall, I think Palace will be a bit disappointed in this game, to be honest. I think they will want to have built on last week's win away at Leicester and, you know, at home to what is not necessarily one of the classic big four teams, and also at home to someone that didn't finish in the top half last season. They'd have been really wanting to make a statement in this game. But to keep Brighton, you know, the second top scorers in the league, to just one goal is no mean feat, and they should be using this as an opportunity to build on, because, yeah, as I say, 1-0 is not a terrible result. They should be happy with the performance and look to build on it going forward. Now we move on to, well, the two games that I sort of built up to be the juiciest games of the weekend. It's Villa-Leicester that we're going to talk about first, and then followed by Everton-West Ham. I do want to issue a small apology to anyone that listened to my preview and thought these two games were going to be fantastic, because they were fine, but they weren't amazing. I thought there was going to be a bit more jeopardy, a bit more intrigue within them, but that's football, I guess. But yeah, let's start with the Midlands derby. It was another one that was live on YouTube on Sunday afternoon. Chastity Grant had an early chance, but there was a fantastic sliding block from Takarada to make sure that went out for a corner. I thought Kirsty Hansen looked fantastic in this game. She had a lot of progressive carries forwards, really threatening the Leicester defence. Jordan Nobbs had a good strike from distance. I say good strike, she struck it well, but it was straight at Janina Leipzig in goal. Missy Bokern did something quite similar. Easy one for Leipzig to catch. It was interesting to see how Leicester set up, because Ruby Mace was playing very high. In fact, other than Chosanote, she was Leicester's sort of highest player, looking at her average position on the pitch. She was almost playing as a kind of centre forward in the game, alongside Yuka and Mickey. Which, yeah, was very strange to see from a player like Ruby Mace. You'd probably more associate her with a midfield position. I know Opta list her as a defender, which is somewhere where she has played for quite a while, but not necessarily where Amandine McCall is looking to play her at the moment. Villa ended up with a great chance late on when Anna Patton found herself shooting from slightly closer than the penalty spot, but it was a great save from Janina Leipzig. It actually had 0.67 post-shot XG, so that means that for a shot from that position, you know, taking it as she did with a strong foot, with the keeper in the way, etc., all that jazz, 2/3 of the time you would expect the person taking the shot to score, and that was actually the sort of statistically hardest save to make in the whole match. But she stood up well, saved it with a strong arm, and kept Leicester in it, and basically ended up winning that point for Leicester. That was Villa's first draw in the league for about 18 months. They didn't get a single one in the league last season. And it ended a run of 6 away losses for Leicester. They can now, I think, try and build on this. They've got a point away at a, currently relegation rival, which is a space they won't want to be in. But there they are. They can use that to build on and take it as a positive. It is the first clean sheet in the league for both sides. So, you know, at least they've both got that under their belt. I don't think they'd have agreed on that in the tunnel beforehand, but in the league, anyway, that is, because Villa did get one in the League Cup against Palace. On a slightly more negative note, that clean sheet for Villa now means it's 3 games in a row for Leicester without scoring. They obviously scored on the opening day in that 1-1 against Liverpool, but since then they have not met the net. And obviously only scoring 1 goal from the first 4 games isn't great, and isn't necessarily the sort of form that's going to see you pushing up into the top half. Villa kind of dominated the game. They had 61% possession to Leicester's 39%. They had 16 shots compared to Leicester's 9. Anna Patton getting the most shots in the game out of nowhere. But they got 4 on target to Leicester's only 1 on target. I think Leicester were definitely missing Jutta Rantala. She's obviously wasn't included in the matchday squad. She's thought to be out injured. We don't know how long for at the moment, but she'll be a big loss, especially with Shannon O'Brien out as well. That's sort of their, I think, best 2 wingers. They've got the likes of Deanne Rose and Missy Goodwin coming through, so they'll both likely get some minutes, and they'll really need to use this as an opportunity to stake their place in the team, because when players like Rantala and O'Brien come back, they're going to be wanting to get their place back in the side, and Goodwin and Rose will want to be keeping theirs. So they'll all have a point to prove to the manager. Back to how Villa dominated the game. They had 537 passes to Leicester's 313 completed, a difference of 224 or 72% more. Lucy Parker and Anna Patton, the two centre-backs of Villa, were the only two players that got over 100. In fact, no other player completed more than 60 passes, and Sophie Howard completed the most for Leicester with just 50, so quite a big difference between the Leicester and Villa centre-backs. Aston Villa had 809 touches in the game compared to Leicester's 581, so 228 difference there. Again, quite a big difference. The top 5 players for the most touches were all Aston Villa players, including, probably unsurprisingly, Patton and Parker, the centre-backs, both with over 120. And they were also the only players above 85. Again, Sophie Howard was the one that had the most for Leicester with 69 touches. Rachel Daly had the most touches in the opposition's box with 9. There were 3 players that had 5, which were, strangely, Sam Tierney, who is a centre midfielder and played a bit deeper for Leicester yesterday. But then the other 2 players that had 5 were Katie Robinson and Adriana Leon, who only came on with about half an hour to go. They also were the 2 players that were the most dispossessed in the game, 3 for Robinson and 2 for Leon. So I think they were probably sent on with a message from DePaul of high risk and high reward, because they were doing their best to get in the box and get those touches. But yeah, as I say, they were also getting dispossessed in it. Missy Goodwin, I wanted to give her a little shout out as well, because she won the most duels in the match. In fact, she won 8 out of 11 that she contested. She didn't win either of the 2 aerial duels, but won 8 of the 9 ground duels that she went into. Obviously, you would expect someone to win 50% of the duels, because in every duel there is one winner, one loser. So to win 8 out of 9 for a player that's, I think if you've seen what Missy Goodwin looks like, you know she's not exactly a big brute of a player. She's doing really well to win 8 out of 9 there, and really shows her level of commitment and intensity to what she's trying to do. The final stat I just wanted to focus on this game in particular was about Yuka Mimiki. So I mentioned before about how, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, about how she'd won all of her aerial duels in the league, which no one had done, or no one had contested as many as her while winning all of them. She contested 2 aerial duels in this match and won both of them. Again, I don't know how she does it at 5'0", but something about her is just really good in the air for some reason. I don't know how she does it. After all the other results, Villa are now the only team not to pick up at least 1 point on the road this season. I know they're obviously at home today, but with the other results from around the grounds, it does show that they are a team that needs to up their game a little bit on the road. You can say, one of those games obviously was against Chelsea. That is a difficult place to go, but yeah, coming up next, in their next sort of couple of away games, they're definitely going to be wanting to get at least a point, if not 3, 4, 6. Villa are the best team at defending 1v1s so far in the league. They only get beat 40% of the time, which is actually quite low. I think that's probably a stat that would look a little bit different had Jutta Rantaala played, because she is very good at that as a player. But nevertheless, Villa can take some good solace from that, because like I mentioned, they've played some good teams, like they have played Chelsea so far, and they're still that good at defending one-on-one situations. Leicester have quite a few stats where they are up there in the league. CJ Bott, I've already mentioned, has the most tackles won in the league, 16, alongside Caldente, as I mentioned earlier. They've won the most tackles as a team and made the most interceptions. They have drawn the most fouls with 50. They have the best record against their post-shot XG. So they have, with the number of shots or the quality of shots they faced, they should have conceded 2.3 goals more. That's from the shots on target, I should say, with post-shot XG. So a mix of Leipzig and Lisa Kopp, the 2 goalkeepers, are doing wonders for Leicester at the moment. Leicester have also made the most recoveries in the league with 192, although it is worth noting that the top 5 are all very close to each other. In fact, the top 5 teams are only split by 2. Villa, the team they played this weekend, are only 1 behind on 191, the same as Arsenal and Man City, and Spurs are on 190. So it's also worth noting that this isn't just a stat that's, the teams lower down the league or the teams with less possession are likely to have. Even the teams that have more possession and are higher up the league, like Man City, for example, are still only 1 away from having the most recoveries in the league. Rachel Daly still has the most XG in the league. She added another 0.4 onto it in this game, taking her up to 2.7 overall. And obviously she is slightly overachieving that with 3 goals so far this season, albeit none yesterday. Overall, I think it was probably a point earned by Leicester. Villa probably did deserve a goal. I don't think Leicester necessarily deserved a goal. They didn't create many good chances. Villa had some, especially that Anna Patton one right near the end, but it was Leipzig in goal that really did the business for Leicester. They did well defensively as a group, but yeah, as I say, it was Leipzig that made the difference, I think, between the two teams today, and I think a draw was fair. The other big game in the sort of juicy bottom of the table battle was Everton West Ham, also at 2 o'clock on Sunday, also on YouTube. And again, it probably wasn't quite up to the billing that I put it up to, but Vivasai showed really good strength early on and set up Anouk Denton for the first goal of the game, followed by, in the second half, Everton equalising when Melissa Lawley put in a cross that got, I think, what we can all agree is a very fortunate deflection to lob King Shemek and make it 1-1, which is how the game ended. For the first time in 4 games against them, West Ham have finally scored against Everton, which will be a relatively minor streak in the grand scheme of things, but still something they'll be happy to have ended. Everton are still without a win in the WSL at home since February, which, yes, obviously there's been a summer break in between that, but there's been a lot of games since they won that game in February, and they won't be wanting to keep that up for much longer. And against West Ham, a team that was, joint with them at the bottom of the league, basically, that was their golden opportunity to do so. In this game, Everton had slightly more possession, 54-46, slightly more passes, an extra 49. They had 2 more shots and 2 more shots on target, 6 to West Ham's 4. But it was a very close game overall. And to be honest, I don't think 1-1 was an unfair scoreline. They created similar levels of XG, Everton 1.4 to West Ham's 1. So, to the closest 1 goal, that is 1-1. I think 1-1 is a relatively fair result. With Everton's goal being an own goal, technically, because it was the deflected cross that, the cross wasn't going in, the deflection took it in, that means Everton still technically haven't scored themselves. No Everton player has scored a goal, which won't be anything that Brian Sorensen is happy about, and definitely something Everton still need to work on. In fact, Everton still haven't had any goal-creating actions in the league after 4 games. They were the only team after 3 games to have 0, and still haven't managed to get one. And like I mentioned, this was at home to West Ham, potentially their easiest chance to start doing some of those numbers. And yeah, we're still apparently unable to. West Ham have completed the fewest passes in the league now this season with 1,100 exactly. Amber Tiziak has made the most clearances. The West Ham defender has made 37. The next highest is Sophie Howard on 26. So Tiziak is 42% more than anyone else, which is quite a big difference, especially, I know it's low numbers at this point in the season, but that is quite a big difference. Something else I want to highlight was Vivasai, because she has now drawn the most fouls in the league with 10. While you won't necessarily think that much of that, that is the most, obviously, like I said, this season, she is the player that got the most last season as well, with 48. At this point last season, she'd drawn 8 fouls, so as in after 4 games, so she's slightly ahead of that curve and is looking like she may end up being the player again this season that draws the most fouls. West Ham are obviously a team that aren't going to score loads and loads of goals, and they need all the help they can get. So having a player that can win free kicks and things like that, maybe penalties, is super useful for them. And although it may not be the conventional way of scoring goals, it's going to be super useful for them going forward. As I mentioned, I think 1-1 was probably fair in this game. If you looked at the numbers, looked at the stats, then 1-1 would probably be the scoreline you would assume, and 1-1 the scoreline it was. On to the last game of the weekend. It was Liverpool 1, Man City 2. This one was also Sunday afternoon, 3 o'clock. This one live on Sky Sports. The young Canadian, Olivia Smith, who, by the way, is 20, not the 16 that you might have heard elsewhere. She opened the scoring with the first goal of the game, which was from 30 yards out, a shot with only 0.02 XG, which means that you would expect of shots from that distance, in that sort of position, etc., you'd only expect 1 out of 50 to go in, but she beat Yamashita. Yamashita was maybe a little bit out of position, but Liverpool won't care about that. It was a good goal nonetheless and a great strike. Bunny Shaw then equalised with quite a slow header in the second half into the far bottom corner. I think Rachel Laws probably should have done a little bit better with this, although I don't know if it got a deflection or she might have been slightly unsighted or something. I'm sure there might have been a reason why she sort of seemed to be almost running after it rather than diving. It was a bit of a strange way to try and save a shot, but Bunny Shaw won't mind, and neither will Man City. In injury time, Bunny Shaw was played through by yet another Leia Alexandri progressive pass. She is, by the way, still the #1 player for progressive passes in the WSL. Nife did what she could to try and hold Shaw off. She was, I think, basically fouling her, doing as much as she could to, not just go shoulder to shoulder with Shaw, but really go arm to arm and try and drag her around. But such is the strength of Bunny Shaw. She held her off very well and absolutely rifled it into the top right-hand corner with minimal backlift. Just yet another example of why Bunny Shaw is one of, if not the best striker, as like central striker in the world. City were very much the better team, I think, after that equaliser. You can see that from the numbers as well, because once Bunny Shaw got her first goal, Liverpool then didn't have a shot for the rest of the half. Man City were on a mission to get that second one, and Liverpool just had to defend it. They didn't really have much of a choice. It was the first loss Liverpool have had since they last played Man City, actually, in March this year. They played some good teams in that space as well. They've played Chelsea, they've played Manchester United, but yeah, Man City were the last team to beat them, and obviously they've now done it again. In this game, Man City did beat Liverpool on XG. They were 1.1 XG ahead, so probably unsurprising that they won by 1 goal. It was 0.4 for Liverpool and 1.5 for Man City. Man City absolutely dominated the ball. They had 76% possession. They had 649 passes completed to Liverpool's 146, so more than 4 times as many passes. Leia Alexandri got 118 on her own, so was only 28 passes behind the whole of the Liverpool side. Alex Greenwood also getting over 100 with 106. Jasmine Matthews got the most for Liverpool with just 29. The only Man City players that didn't complete that many passes were Bunny Shaw with 16 and Alba Figino with 11. And don't forget that Alba Figino didn't actually start the game. So of the players that started the game, 10 out of 11 got more or completed more passes than Jasmine Matthews, who did the most for Liverpool. Liverpool weren't helped in that by the fact that they only completed 66% of their passes, the fact just under 2/3, which is really poor. I think the general average for the season is somewhere around 80 to 90%. So only completing less than 2/3 is, really quite bad. And I think shows that not necessarily that Liverpool are really bad at that sort of thing, but just that Man City were doing really well with their pressing and making them panic. Aerial duels was something that I highlighted in the preview episode because Liverpool are doing it the most. They are going for the most aerial duels. They've won the most aerial duels. But Man City, before this game anyway, had won the highest percentage of aerial duels. So it's very much a quantity of Liverpool versus the quality of Man City. And there were 30 aerial duels in this game. And just to show which way this went, Liverpool player on her own, Sophie Roman-Haug, won 15 of those, or half of them. In fact, Leia Alexandri was the only player, she won 3, she was the only other player that got more than 2. So Sophie Roman-Haug really dominated this game in the air, and Liverpool generally did. They won 22 of the 30 aerial duels, or 73%. Definitely showing that they were the better team in the air, even if they knew that Man City were going to play them off the park on the floor. Bunny Shaw's 2 goals means that she is now the joint top scorer in the league alongside Kiko Saika and Rachel Daly. City have accumulated the most XG with 8.5 and have the best XG difference on plus 4.6. Liverpool, however, have done some good work defensively. They've only conceded 9 shots on target, which is the fewest in the league. Chelsea are one above them on 10. So even a team that has played 1 game fewer has conceded more shots on target, and obviously the team at the top of the table. Liverpool, unsurprisingly, have won the most aerial duels in the league this season on 74. In fact, they've won more than Arsenal, Palace, Brighton and Chelsea have contested, not combined, just those teams individually. In fact, Sophie Roman-Haug, as I've already mentioned, has won the most aerial duels this season as a player with 32. None of those 4 teams that I've just mentioned, Chelsea, Arsenal, Palace and Brighton, have won more aerial duels than Sophie Roman-Haug has on her own. The other stat I want to highlight for Liverpool today was Taylor Hines. She now becomes the first player to get more than 10 interceptions in the league this year. She's now on 11. In my opinion, she's a very underrated player. I think she's in that sort of bracket of not quite good enough to get into the England side. Has never been quite good enough to get into the England side, but is still, one of the better, top half WSL player comfortably. And it's great to see her captaining Liverpool, and I'm sure she will do for many a season to come. City, obviously, as they always do, have quite a few good stats. To highlight, they are the only team to have completed over 2,000 passes in the league this year, now at 2,348, so quite a big gap to second place. They've also the team with the most touches, with 3,110. In fact, they are over 300 more than the next place on just under 2,800. City also have the most progressive carries and the most carries into the final third, so they're not just on the ball a lot, but they're doing the right sort of things with it. They are still the worst team for defending 1v1s, being beat 66% of the time, 39 out of the 59 that they have attempted to defend. Chelsea with 61%, Arsenal 54% and Brighton on 53% are the only other four teams that have been beaten more than 50% of the time when defending 1v1s. And finally, the stat that I wanted to highlight was that City only made one sub in this game, which means they've now only made 11 subs in 4 games, which is the fewest in the league. Even United and Chelsea, who have played a match less, have made 13 and 14 respectively. Gareth Taylor lost one of their main players last season to an ACL injury in Jill Roord for the vast majority of the season, and she was a player that I think, if she'd have remained fit, could have been the difference between Man City coming first and second. In fact, almost certainly would have been. But he's still not necessarily learning from that, and he's not making many substitutions. I think if this carries on throughout the season, you're going to see Man City start to pick up some injuries, maybe bad ones like ACLs, just from overexertion of the players. And I think that's something that could end up biting them in the leg and could end up, once again, being the difference between Chelsea or Man City winning the title. And finally, just on this game, I want to highlight some rumours that are coming out today that Chloe Kelly may be leaving the club. She's obviously dropped down the pecking order a bit. Viv Miedemar's come in, Jill Roord is back from fitness, Alba Fagino's come in, Lauren Hemp is above her in the pecking order, Mary Fowler's above her in the pecking order, there's Jess Park who's definitely bursting onto the scene. So it's unsurprising that Chloe Kelly wouldn't necessarily want to keep sticking around at Man City. Where she'll end up going, who knows? To be honest, I haven't had enough time to give it any thought, but I'd be interested to hear what your opinions are. So feel free to reply in the show notes or let me know on Twitter or X or Instagram or Threads or wherever you see my posts. Let me know who you think would be Chloe Kelly's best place to go to, both for the player and which club you think would most benefit her heading there. Overall, I think this game was another one that was about fair. Liverpool put up a good fight. They got a relatively lucky goal from distance, which, don't get me wrong, I don't want to take anything away from a good strike from a player that really tormented them in those early minutes. She had a few good opportunities, but Man City they do what Man City do. Bunny Shaw, to quote Lauren Hemp, Bunny Shaw scores goals. And you've just got to expect that they're going to get a goal or two a game, and you're not going to be able to shut them out all the time. You're going to have to try and score more than them if you're going to beat them. But Liverpool put up a good fight, and Man City were just too good. Now, on to my player of the week. It was quite a difficult one this week because there were a few players that put in exceptional performances. I think Mara Ramirez was fantastic for Chelsea against Arsenal, albeit she did get subbed off kind of early on. Manchester United's Elizabeth Turland did great. She obviously got her first 2 goals of the season, and I'd expect that to continue. Valentine's Joyce played very well in that game as well. Janina Leitzig, on the subject of goalkeepers, was fantastic for Leicester away at Villa. And then in the Liverpool Man City game, I think if Olivia Smith had played the whole game, I think she may have been the player that could have got this accolade for me, because she started off the first half so well. Obviously, she went off at half-time with an injury. But my player of the week is going to go to Bunny Shaw. I think she linked up so well with Lauren Hemp today. I think she did really well with that pass that she got in from Leia Alexandri, and to hold off Niamh Faye in the way that she did. Niamh Faye is not a weak, inexperienced player. She knows what she's doing, and she was basically fouling Bunny Shaw, and Bunny Shaw was still strong enough and good enough to go, yeah, I don't care. I'm just going to hold you off, and I'm going to absolutely rifle this with minimal backlift right into the top bins. I think she's basically won the game for Man City yesterday. Without her goals, they would have been 1-0 down. She demonstrated her quality in an excellent way, won Man City the game, and that is why she wins my player of the week. So that is game week 4 done and dusted. The top 3 in the league now are all unbeaten. That is Chelsea, Manchester City and Man United. 2 of the top 3 still have a game in hand as well, because obviously Chelsea and Man United had their match postponed. There's a bit of a gap opening up because 5th place Liverpool are actually closer to the relegation zone, 12th, than they are to one place ahead of them, 4th. They're 3 points away from being relegated, but 4 points away from the top 4. So there's a bit of a gap opening up now between the top 4 and the bottom 8. The bottom 4 are all still level on points as well with 2, but a win next week could get those teams into the top half, even as high as 5th on those 5 points that Liverpool are still on. Obviously, it depends how matches go, but let's look ahead to next weekend because it's going to be a really interesting last round before the international break. I think there's going to be some teams with a point to prove and some players with a point to prove that are going to want to do all they can to get a win. I think especially that Leicester-Everton game is one to keep an eye on. 3 o'clock on the Sunday, that's going to be quite a big 6-pointer down at the bottom of the table, with the other two in the bottom 4, Villa and West Ham, playing Man City and Arsenal. But there we go, listener. Plenty to look forward to. Thank you for joining me today as we had a look back at the weekend's action, back at game week 4 of the season. Game week 4 already. We're almost 20% of the way through. As ever, if you've enjoyed the episode, please do go and give the pod a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to follow or subscribe, depending what it is, on your selected podcast platform. Don't forget to follow me on any social medias that you like to use. I'm mainly on X and Instagram. I also put the odd thing on Threads, the odd thing on TikTok. So if you want to follow me on either of those as well, please do. But it's been a pleasure having you with me tonight, listener. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will speak to you next time.